enthusiasts and relaxation seekers. My name is Cinephile ASMR, and today is a video all about the man, the myth, and the absolute legend, Denis Villeneuve. You may know most relevantly now as the director behind Dunes 1 and 2, but this man has had a career moreover almost 20 years making films of all different themes, sizes, feels, looks, and that to me is the thing that has made me the most excited about this video, because we're taking a filmmaker who I am, spoiler alert, really do think makes nothing but good movies. He's never made a bad film, and I think kind of ranking the films based off of what I feel is going to be fascinating. But of course, a few things. Make sure you comment what your ranking would be. Subscribe if you haven't. Turn on that notification bell. But more importantly, follow me on Letterboxd. So, with that out of the way, let's also clarify a couple things. Firstly, I am not going to put Denis Villeneuve's first two feature films because I just felt, and I wrestled with this quite a bit, it isn't fair to put the movies that I would assume he self-funded for a couple $1,000s as he was beginning to find himself in a list with movies that are made for hundreds of millions of dollars, and he gained a lot more technical craft. It just didn't seem fair. So I'm going to be ranking 9 of his movies, starting with Polytechnique and ending with Dunes Part 2. And secondly, out of any ranking I've ever done on this channel, this is the one that I'm going to ask you guys to take a moment, listen, and before you hate, comment, rage bait, whatever you want to do, just take it, breathe. This is an ASMR video, but even I was shocked with reevaluating all of his filmography, where some stood above others, where some shined where I didn't think they would, and where some kind of fell where I thought they were going to succeed better than the others. And I think what better way to start than at the bottom number 9 spot with Enemy. Again, I don't think this man has ever crafted a bad film in his body, in his mind, but I feel Enemy, from the first time I watched it years ago, upon reevaluating it as well, it doesn't hold up. It really doesn't. Conceptually speaking, a man who lives a mundane life, seeing a duplicate of himself in a movie he rents and being consumed by this idea of wanting to meet him. But when they do, both of their lives are changed for the worse, the better, but also just seeing how each of them kind of adapt and evolve as people because of their intersection. It is such a fascinating concept. Jake Gyllenhaal is really, really good. It is not my favorite performance from him in a Denis film. We'll get to that later. But this movie does have an ambience and a tone and a vibe that you do not get in any of his other movies. He works with a specific DP, a specific composer. It has a very specific look, but because of that specificity, not all of it works. And I think I was watching this with someone, and they came up with the thought that it felt like a college student film. Visually speaking, it is kind of nothing but this yellowish tinge to itself. It doesn't have that diversity in every frame, every scene like his other movies, and it makes me wonder, considering this is sandwiched in between arguably what people would consider their favorite Villeneuve films, with Insomnia 2 years prior, and in the same year, which is mind-blowing, he made Prisoners, another Villeneuve favorite. This movie just fits comfortably at the bottom spot for me because I don't think it utilizes its premise to the fullest. It wastes a lot of time in the beginning, and in the moments that I loved, we breezed past it. I wish we got to sit on them more, but I really do enjoy it, and I think I like the swings it takes, although a lot of them are misses. Now please, take a moment, and let me explain, because at my number 8 spot, we have Arrival. Now, I've seen this movie twice. When it came out in theaters, I had watched it as a young guy, trying to figure out my place in the world, and it hit me at a moment I needed. The way that the structure evolves, the way that the screenplay plays out these characters, and the inevitable reveal of how the movie is actually structured took my breath away. It felt like a completely different intimacy in the sci-fi realm, and I was enamored by it. So much so that from the years that followed watching Blade Runner and the Dune films, I felt those were amazing, but nothing was like Arrival. And then I rewatched it, and I think it is the perfect case of a movie that only deserves to be watched once, to feel the visceral emotion on an instant watch, on the first time of experiencing the twists and turns fresh, new. But when you rewatch it, it didn't hit for me. There was things that stuck out for me. I thought the performances were a lot better the first time than the second. Not to say they're bad, but I think the screenplay itself, and it makes sense because I did some research and that screenwriter has done like Final Destination 5, Lights Out, and Bird Box. Not to say those are bad, but very different from Arrival. And I think the best parts of the screenplay are the things that are brought down as an adaptation from the book to the movie. The military aspect of how the US is this peaceful nation, and then how you have like China and Russia being very volatile, wanting to combat these aliens. It feels juvenile, it feels very immature, and it detracted me from that intimate story of a woman trying to find out what is happening while also finding out what's wrong with her, what she's feeling, and it just didn't hold up. I felt the ending to be a bit montagey and manipulative with the music. The visual element, while beautiful at times, didn't stick, but I'm not gonna lie, I was locked in from beginning to end. I was never bored, and it sounds like I didn't like this movie again. I like to love to adore all of Villeneuve's films. It was just that rewatch that didn't do it for me and hold that same spark and regard like I thought it was going to. But still, a very good movie with a very timely message as well. At number 7, we have one of the few first-time watches post Dune 2 where I needed to make this list with Polytechnique, a movie that I really could not have expected where it was gonna go. I went in blind, and I couldn't recommend you do the same anymore. It's 70 minutes. It documents a real-life tragedy. I won't dive too deep into it, but it is the way that the perspectives of multiple characters play out in this tragedy that left my mouth on the floor. You really get to feel the story of the notions behind survivor's guilt as a whole, what drives people to do the things that they do, both good and heinous. And in 70 minutes, it takes a story that could have been used for melodrama and entertainment, but portrays it in as pure and as honest a way that really opens the door for the kind of works and themes he would play with later. It's just all around an incredible film that, for especially as early of a filmmaker in his career as Villeneuve was, it feels so good. It feels like it has an understanding of what it's trying to do. There is some shots in this movie that I thought to myself, there is absolutely no way that I could have ever thought of that. It is the kind of movie that fellow artists and filmmakers dream of making. It really is an incredible thing, with a final line of dialogue in the movie that reduced me to a puddle, an absolute puddle. At my number 6 spot is a movie I've seen placed a lot higher on Villeneuve rankings. I just can't get myself to do it. It is Dune Part 1, a movie that, in all intents and purposes, should not exist. Villeneuve took arguably the most unadaptable product and made it something beautiful. It sets the foundational groundwork for what Part 2 and Part 3 with Messiah is going to carry through. It creates this world and characters in a way that doesn't feel dumbed down or he's spoon-feeding or talking down to the audience. It feels organic. My issue with the film lies in, I think, the big battle, the invasion, the fall of the House of Atreides feels rushed. And surprisingly, one of the biggest things, the discoveries I found in the wake of Dune 2's popularity, is Denis Villeneuve shoots and writes some incredible pieces and moments and scenes, but he cuts them. And there's some scenes that I've watched and I've seen images of like Paul and his father talking the moment they move. And I feel when you're going to kill off, spoiler alert, the father to Paul and Jessica's husband, that is the catalyst for so much. I wish we got more. It undercuts a couple character moments. I wish Jessica and Leto had more time together, because what we get is incredible. And oftentimes I will say the complete less, or I wish it was done differently. I just wish we got more of what we had, because it feels like the hour and a half point when the invasion is over, you still have a good 45 minutes of the movie that isn't bad, but it feels like it is kind of screeching to a halt or a crawl, and I wish we just had more, albeit maybe restructure the movie, because I don't think it should have been longer. It's just, I loved what we got so much, I just wish we had more, because it felt a little rushed at times, and then other times it felt very slow. I was never bored though, and considering where part 2 goes, I'm very glad it exists. At number 5, we have a title that I had just rewatched a couple days ago, and I had no idea it was going to be as high on this list as it was, but Sicario is a movie that really is a show, don't tell kind of film. It is arguably what I would say is Denis' most accessible in terms of a plot. It doesn't have very many twists or turns. It isn't very dense, but it's just a group of FBI agents trying to infiltrate a massive cartel mob and the kingpin of them all. But it's the way that it takes an inherently very simple story structure and opens itself up through the technical elements. The score, rest in peace, Johan Johansson. I think he's the best composer that has worked with Villeneuve, working on Arrival and Sicario. This movie feels mean, angry, like a beast. And the performances here, everybody, the main three, are doing entirely different things. Benicio del Toro, Josh Brolin, oh my god. It's like you are watching 3 different perspectives of how people view violence and what they get out of it. Benicio del Toro's character, who doesn't say many words, but when he does, it's powerful, does this for a much deeper and personal reason. Josh Brolin is almost like this fanatic who craves the violence, who gets a thrill out of it, and then Emily Blunt is this pawn who doesn't know what she's doing, and both of those performances, all 3 of those performances, make a film that might be my favorite shot Villeneuve movie. I don't know. I'm kind of feeling this in real time, having rewatched it after years, and it's like almost the antithesis to the Arrival effect for me, where it was a movie that I didn't expect to love, but I came out of it feeling very impacted in ways that I didn't expect. The side characters, Daniel Kaluuya, John Bernthal, the way that this film is lit, that scene where they go in the tunnel, people can make the argument it's the best thing that Denis has ever directed. I'm not going to argue, I don't know, because it's just that damn good. If you didn't like it on the first watch, or you thought it was way too simplistic, pick up on that a second time, and you may just enjoy it more like I did. At number 4, we have a film that had been on my watch list for the longest time, and when I tell you, this film did not disappoint, although being one of my highest regarded anticipated films in years, it did not disappoint or sell itself short for me based off of my excitement. Insomnia is the one film on this list, even though it is not my number 1. I could not fathomably stress enough, the less you know about this movie, the better off you'll be. Did not know anything about this, and the way that this story evolved, the narrative built, the characters grew in this world, the landscape, the cinematography, the score, the direction. There is nothing more gratifying than A, feeling like you are in the assured hands of a filmmaker who knows what the hell they're doing, but B, watching a film in an early filmmaker's career that is the groundwork for what they would really become. Because I feel without this movie, we would not get any of the films that you know and love today from Villeneuve. It is harrowing, it is dark, it's tragic, but by the end, there is a light at the end of the tunnel that if you do not cry or feel disgusted by this movie, you are not a human being. The performances all across the board, especially from the mother, might be one of my favorite performances ever executed in film. Villeneuve knows how to get performances, and you need to check this out. But now we are down to the top 3, The Wire, and all of these could rotate, in different degrees to being my number 1, but at number 3, and I feel more comfortable with putting this here than the rest of the 2, we have Blade Runner 2049. Who would have thought that a movie decades after an original epic sci-fi landmark in filmmaking is potentially better than that? I love Blade Runner, but 2049 breathes a new sense of life and vibrancy to the franchise in a way that feels individual, but also paying homage and respect to the groundwork that built it to where it is. I love this movie. I think the writing to make Ryan Gosling's character, feel as well-rounded, although he has lived a life of binary zeros and ones as an officer who is given directives and he needs to execute. The level of detachment that Gosling has to portray, it is my favorite Gosling performance, and it is my favorite performance that Villeneuve directs and captures. The world, the beauty, the visuals is incredible. However, I stated on my Letterboxd review, I have 3 main issues with this film, 2 minor and 1 pretty major one. The minor one, I don't think the score is very good. Considering it is Hans Zimmer, it all kind of blends together by the end, very loud, operatic synth, but it doesn't work as well. And I think there is a design choice that Villeneuve does in his big sci-fi films, which is this brutalist architecture and style. And while I do think it works wonders in a film like Dune, it didn't work for me in this, and I feel the score further reinforces that for me, and I don't really love it. The second minor thing, I think Jared Leto sucks. If you didn't know, he wasn't originally supposed to play that character. It was supposed to be the late David Bowie, but because of his unfortunate, untimely passing, Jared Leto was replacing him, and he's not good. I don't like Jared Leto, that is a personal thing. Don't think he's a good actor. He wasn't good in this. But my third and biggest, most major complaint is I think this movie falters its biggest moments in the third act, and I love the first 2. I'm so engaged in who Kay is, the realization that he is someone or isn't, and the person and the people around him are lying. It's spellbinding. However, when this movie has to buckle up and be a Blade Runner sequel, it sort of loses me. You get like 20 minutes of Harrison Ford, and he's good. He isn't just that grustly old man, but he adds a lot to the table. However, I just don't think this movie facilitates all of the things that it tries to do in being a Blade Runner sequel to its fullest. That moment where Kay is saved and you realize it's this whole society of people trying to stand up and be free, it feels very tacked on. But everything that deals with him, that final fight, his send-off, is chef's kiss magnifico. Those first 5 minutes, Dave Bautista, holy hell, that alone is worth the price of admission. And at number 2, I said it in my full-length review, but Dune Part 2 is exemplary. A one-of-a-kind generational landmark, and I think having rewatched his older films while seeing Dune Part 2 in theaters over and over again 3 times now, where I very much am planning to see it for a 4th, I love this film. I adore it, and I think it is emblematic of what Villeneuve does as a visionary filmmaker by dissecting characters in a story or a plot that is taking them out of their comfort zone. And where this movie flourishes for me is visually and narratively the emphasis on spirituality, on prophecy, on messianic figures that may or may not fulfill the prophecies that you have put your whole life towards. The side performances are amazing. Zendaya, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, Dave Bautista, Skarsgård, Butler, everybody, and Timothy Chalamet shines, but you get so much depth and new details to pick up on every rewatch. It is a movie that aims to do things, and it soars, it crushes. It isn't my number 1 because I think partially it feels incomplete, similar to Spider-Verse, which is a film that actually is in my top 50 of all time. I don't think I could ever call that my favorite movie because it is sort of a placeholder that carries the baton from part 1 but holds it out for part 3, and we haven't gotten those part 3s yet, and they could drop the ball, and I'm worried that it might sour part 2. I don't think they will though, because Villeneuve up until this point has had a command on filmmaking like nobody there is. So that is why this is my number 2. Maybe in a couple of years from now it will be my number 1, but for now and for a while it is Prisoners, a film whose acting, whose story feels so dark, decrepit, cold, and frigid. I think to myself a lot, as someone who wants to make art in some capacity or just talk about it, the fact that Villeneuve, and this needs to be studied, in all of the was in 2009. Dune Part 2, 2024, less than 15 years. But moreover, I think to myself, he worked with Roger Deakins for 3 movies. We have Prisoners, Sicario, and 2049. Each of those movies feel almost opposite to each other in color palette, visuals, shot composition, story. And this movie, paired with the rest of Villeneuve's filmography, has that icy feel to itself. The story of how far people will go to get the answers they want, even if those answers aren't the truth. Hugh Jackman electrifies in this movie. You ache with him. You ache with Paul Dano. You ache with Gyllenhaal. His character as Detective Loki, the subtleties, his eye twitches, the things that he does, paired with, juxtaposed to Hugh Jackman, is kind of unreal. It is a story that I will never get tired of. It is a film whose final seconds where you hear that sound, not gonna spoil it, might be like my favorite movie ending of all time. It is a story that I get engulfed into over and over again. I just can never get enough of it. Again, this was such a fun list and ranking to do. I had not done one that had made me this excited in a very long time, and I'm so excited that you can hear what I have to say, but my excitement stems as well from hearing what your ranking is going to be. Be respectful in the comments though, and tell me what you thought of this video, the ranking, and yours. What is your favorite Villeneuve? And if you stayed to the end of this video, tell me what is your favorite scene from a Denis Villeneuve film. There's so many to choose from for me. I think the tunnel sequence in Sicario, RV scene, or the many torture scenes in Prisoners. There is, the Harkonnen fight in Dune. There is the final battle in Dune. There is so many. Comment down below. Like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Letterboxd. But most importantly, remember,